Elon Musk thought he could silence him with a dismissive glance. Instead, Assemblymember Zohran Mamdani sat upright, delivered one sentence, and triggered a national reckoning that no one could ignore. No one quite knew how the day would unfold. Not the press lined up behind the velvet ropes, not the aides fidgeting with seating cards in the Roosevelt room, not even Musk himself. But if anyone had a sense that something real, something disruptive, was about to happen, it might have been Zohran Mamdani. He wasn't there to perform, not today. He'd flown in from Queens the night before, slept barely 3 hours, and walked into the White House that morning with a worn canvas folder under his arm and the kind of resolve that couldn't be faked. The event had been billed as a bipartisan roundtable on education access in the digital age, a symbolic gesture of unity, at least on paper. Officially, the goal was to discuss school modernization, AI in classrooms, and equitable funding. Privately, both sides had arrived with their talking points locked and loaded. The room was filled with power players, senators from Texas and Illinois, a tech executive turned education advisor, and the Secretary of Education. Polished to perfection. At the head of the table sat Elon Musk, tech mogul, newly appointed National Innovation Chair, mid-second term in his self-styled mission to reinvent government, flanked by advisors and cameras. Zohran took a seat at the far end of the table, but not silently. He leaned in slightly, calm but deliberate, and nodded to a Republican representative from Utah. "Good morning," he said with quiet precision. Then he opened his folder. No drama, no posturing, just bullet points, local statistics, handwritten letters from teachers in Jackson Heights, real lives, real ink. A staffer opened the meeting with the usual rhetoric: bipartisan goals, shared commitment, 21st century classrooms. Then handed the floor to Musk. Musk launched into a monologue. Metrics, milestones, mentions of disrupting inefficiencies. He touted record public-private partnerships, emphasized school choice as market empowerment, and dismissed concerns about equity as old paradigms. His tone was caffeinated but defensive, like someone expecting pushback and already annoyed by it. Zohran listened. He let Musk speak, let the others take their turns, some flattering, others offering minor objections wrapped in politeness. But when it was his turn, Zohran didn't raise a hand. He just spoke. "Mr. Musk," he began, "I represent a district where schools still don't have stable Wi-Fi, where teachers pool cash to buy printer paper, and where students sit in classrooms without heat in February." There was a pause, small, subtle, just long enough for someone at the back to look up from their iPad. He continued, "We keep hearing about choice, but choice without equity is just privilege by another name. If we don't fund public education fairly, we're not innovating. We're abandoning." His voice was steady, respectful, but unflinching, like someone who'd rehearsed every word on the subway ride in. He pulled out a crumpled letter from a middle school teacher in Elmhurst who'd used her paycheck to buy geometry sets. Musk raised his eyebrows, then glanced toward his chief of staff. "Are you done?" he asked curtly. 10 more seconds, Zohran replied. "But I think it's fair to ask, why are we still pretending this system works, and when do we stop designing solutions that exclude the very people we claim to serve?" The room froze, not tense, not loud, just still. The Secretary of Education shifted awkwardly. A senator scribbled something. Zohran closed his folder and folded his hands neatly on the table. He wasn't there to perform. He wasn't there to humiliate. He was there to ask what no one else would say aloud. Musk didn't answer, not directly. Instead, he leaned to his left and muttered something inaudible. Within seconds, 2 security staff entered from the side door, quiet but unmistakable. And that's when it became clear. He wasn't going to argue with him. He was going to remove him. But the moment those guards stepped forward, everything changed. Zohran Mamdani didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice, didn't even move in his chair. He just looked at the guards, then looked back at Musk, as if he hadn't finished his sentence. One of the guards, a younger man with a shaved head and a discreet White House security pin, took a measured step forward. His eyes scanned the room, not aggressive, but clearly waiting for a cue. from Zohran, from Musk, from anyone, to make the next move. Musk leaned back slightly in his chair, tapped his index finger twice on the table. The signal was clear. "Assemblymember," the guard said quietly, "we're going to need you too." Zohran raised one hand, not to stop him, just to interject. "I'm fine," he said softly. His voice was calm, almost reassuring, as if he were the one de-escalating. "I'm just asking a question." The room responded with subtle shifts. Chairs creaked, papers rustled, people shifted in their seats. The kind of background noise that signals everyone feels something might be about to go too far. And unexpectedly, Senator Howard Keller from Wisconsin, a Republican better known for his golf handicap than legislative muscle, spoke up. "He didn't threaten anyone, did he?" The air thickened. Musk turned his head toward Keller, eyebrows raised. "I mean," Keller added, shrugging slightly, "I thought this was a roundtable. Aren't we supposed to talk?" Musk didn't reply, but his jaw tensed. An advisor leaned in, whispered something into Musk's ear. Zohran, still seated, shifted slightly, making sure everyone could hear him. "I wasn't attacking you, Mr. Musk. I asked a question. I represent thousands of families in Jackson Heights whose schools haven't had working heating in years. That's not disruption. That's my job." The guard looked back toward his supervisor, then at Zohran again. He didn't want to escalate, and Zohran wasn't giving him a reason to. Then another unexpected voice joined. Representative Melissa Darnell from Utah, a conservative but not heartless. "He's making a point we all know is valid," she said carefully. "It may not be comfortable, but it's real." That's when Zohran stood up. Not abruptly, not defiantly, just steadily, like someone standing on truth, not ego. "If asking about equity in public schools makes people uncomfortable, he said, then maybe that's the conversation we need most." His voice didn't waver. His posture didn't bend. C-SPAN, which had kept the camera mostly on Musk, now cut to a wide shot. Zohran was front and center. Every second was being recorded. Musk tapped his finger again. Twice. Fast. But the guards didn't move. Whether it was hesitation, confusion, or maybe just conscience, they didn't step forward. Zohran didn't wait. "I'll excuse myself," he said, "but I won't apologize for speaking truth in a room that claims to care about kids." He picked up his folder, pushed his chair in, and walked toward the exit. No shouting, no grandstanding, just quiet defiance. As he passed one of the younger aides, a woman barely out of college, she looked at him, not with pity, not with awe, but with something far more honest, understanding. The door clicked shut behind him. Silence. For several seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. Then Musk, eyes locked on the empty chair, said flatly, "We can move on." But nothing in that room was going to move on the way they'd planned, because by the time Zohran Mamdani reached the White House sidewalk, his name was already trending. He hadn't even passed the gates before his phone buzzed. Once, twice, 3 times. Then again, and again. He hadn't checked his phone yet. He just walked, eyes forward, folder tucked under his arm, shoes clicking steadily against the White House stone like a metronome. Outside, a small knot of reporters stood behind barricades. They hadn't been allowed in. They didn't know exactly what had happened, but they sensed it. They saw the security guard walking just one step behind Zohran, silent, respectful, unsure if he was escorting him or just witnessing something. Inside the Roosevelt room, though, nothing was steady. Elon Musk was clearly irritated. That much was obvious to everyone still seated. He fidgeted with his notes, snapped at a staffer. His responses to the next speaker came off clipped, even mocking. When Rep. Darnell tried to bring up school lunch subsidies, Musk cut her off. "We're not here to talk about cafeteria food." You could practically hear the PR alarm bells ringing at the back of the room. Advisors leaned into one another. A staffer slid a phone across the table toward Musk. A headline glowed on the screen. "Breaking, Musk ejects Assemblymember Zohran Mamdani from education. Roundtable after tense exchange." He stared at it. His jaw didn't clench in anger, but in calculation. This meeting was supposed to be simple, keep it civil, Let everyone talk just enough, then walk away with a few unity-sounding sound bites for the evening news. But Zohran Mamdani, he didn't play the part, he didn't shout, he didn't resist. And somehow that made it worse. One of Musk's longtime advisors leaned in and whispered, "Do we want to respond now or wait until the press briefing?" Musk didn't answer. Outside, on the far edge of the East Wing parking circle, Zohran finally checked his phone. The screen lit up like fireworks. Mentions from public school teachers across the country. Screenshots from the C-SPAN livestream. A dozen missed calls. His chief of staff had texted, "You're everywhere, and I mean everywhere. CNN wants you tonight. MSNBC's calling. You've got trending hashtags in 3 states." Zohran sat down on a low stone bench just to breathe. It was chilly. He didn't notice. A Capitol police officer walked by, gave him a quiet nod. No words, just acknowledgement, then kept walking. Zohran opened Twitter. The clip had already surpassed 200,000 views in under 30 minutes. The caption beneath the video read, "If asking about equity in public schools makes you uncomfortable, then maybe that's the conversation we need most." Zohran Mamdani. And there he was, standing in that room, firm, calm, speaking truth directly to Elon Musk, and refusing to be treated like a threat just for doing his job. In a stitched reply, a woman in Detroit, probably in her late 50s, sat in her car, eyes glossy with tears. "I've waited my whole life to hear someone say that," in that room. Another reply came from a teacher in Flagstaff. "He said what we've all been thinking. That's leadership." Back inside the Roosevelt room, Musk was still fuming beneath the surface. He kept casting glances at the door Zohran had walked through, as if trying to will the moment back under control. At one point he muttered, "He made it about race," to which Senator Geller, without looking up, replied, "No, he made it about schools." That shut the room down. But Zohran wasn't thinking about that anymore. He was on the phone with his mother. "Baby," she said, voice thick with emotion. "Did you just challenge Elon Musk on live TV?" Zohran smiled softly, laughed under his breath, and said nothing. "I asked the question, Mama." There was a pause on the line. "Well," his mother said gently, "you asked the right one." But while Zohran Mamdani was finally catching his breath, the noise outside was only just beginning. By the time he reached his modest hotel in Foggy Bottom, the clip had already crossed 1 million views. Every major cable network had it on a loop, each with their own spin. CNN called it a seismic moment of clarity. Fox News said he had disrespected the process, but the footage didn't lie, and neither did the silence that followed his words. Inside his room, Zohran kicked off his shoes. He sat on the edge of the bed, no lights, just the soft hum of the city. His phone buzzed again. Ava Gordon, his communications director. "I hope you're sitting down," she said before he could even say hello. "Already am." "They're calling it the line of the year." Zohran exhaled slowly. "You mean the line that got me kicked out?" "No, Zo, the line that just put you in every living room in America." He stared out at the window, at the dim outlines of monuments lit by scattered street lamps. "I wasn't trying to make a moment," he said. He trailed off. "You just said what nobody else in that room had the guts to say," Ava replied, "and the internet knows it." But Zohran didn't smile, not fully. He wasn't naive. Viral moments fade, trends get buried. This wasn't about going viral. This was about whether the truth would stick or whether the system would keep pretending it hadn't heard it. Back at the White House, the press briefing room was packed. Reporters fired question after question at the press secretary. Why was Assemblymember Mamdani asked to leave? Was he removed for mentioning funding inequality? Will the administration issue a formal statement? The press secretary deflected, said the roundtable was meant to be collaborative, that disruptions were handled appropriately. It was weak. Everyone saw through it. That night, Zohran joined MSNBC live via Zoom. He wore a simple navy sweater. No makeup, no filter. Hair slightly messy, eyes tired but focused. The host, Nina Conway, greeted him like a returning friend, even though they'd never met. "Assemblymember Mamdani," she said, First of all, thank you, not just for being with us, but for holding your ground. Thank you, Nina. It wasn't planned. It just came out honest. Conway leaned in. When you said, if asking about equity makes you uncomfortable, maybe that's the conversation we need most. Did you know it would land the way it did? Zohran shook his head. I was just tired of pretending. There are kids in my district eating lunch from vending machines, sitting in classrooms without heat. If asking about that is too much, then maybe the system's more broken than anyone's willing to admit. The interview went viral. Again, in a church basement in the Bronx, public school parents watched the replay on a wall projector. In a break room at a community center in Albuquerque, a janitor paused his shift to listen. In a diner off I-55 in southern Missouri, a white waitress named Connie turned up the volume. When a customer grumbled, "Another loud liberal," she replied flatly, "He wasn't yelling, he was telling the truth." Zohran was on a flight back to New York the next morning. Middle seat, economy. The flight attendant recognized him. "You're the Assemblyman, right?" He nodded. "I saw the clip. My son goes to a Title I school. What you said..." She paused. "Thank you." Zohran smiled just a little. "Tell him. I was speaking for him. We're not done fighting." Zohran sank into his airplane seat, closed his eyes, and for the first time since leaving that room, he let himself breathe. This wasn't over, not even close, but something had shifted. He could feel it. Musk may have thought that signaling the guards would shut Zohran down. Instead, he'd handed him a stage, and Zohran had used it to shine a light so bright, no one could look away. By mid-afternoon, the moment had taken on a life of its own. In Washington, the political class was scrambling. Inside Capitol Hill, staffers passed texts like wildfire. One aide to a senior GOP senator messaged bluntly, "Did POTUS really try to have him removed for asking about school budgets?" The reply came fast. "Yep, it's on video, already 3.2 million views." At the White House, Musk's comms team held a closed-door meeting that lasted nearly 2 hours. They were trying to figure out how to spin it. Some pushed to paint Zohran as aggressive by him, but others pushed back, especially the ones who'd actually watched the clip. "He didn't even raise his voice," one said. "He didn't grandstand. It's going to be hard to make this look like a tantrum." Meanwhile, back in Queens, Zohran's district office had turned into a media circus. His legislative assistant, Brittany, stood at the front door trying to hold off local reporters and camera crews. "He's not here," she said for the 5th time. "And no, we don't have a comment yet." Inside, the phone rang constantly. Some constituents left voicemails cheering him on. Others just asked, "Is he okay?" One call came from Mr. Deshaun Wilkes, a retired principal in Jackson Heights. Brittany picked up. "I just want him to know," and he said quietly, "we've waited our whole lives for someone to say that in front of a man like him and not blink." The response wasn't just local. Across the country, people began stitching Zohran's clip with raw footage from their schools. Peeling ceilings, broken desks, missing books. Viral hashtag emerged before sunset. Town asked the real questions. On Reddit, a teacher in Flint posted a photo of a classroom whiteboard with a fist-sized hole in it. "My students deserve better," she wrote. Zohran Mamdani is right. Even late-night hosts weighed in. On the night report, comedian Julian Ray played the clip, paused, then turned to the camera. A brown assemblyman calmly asked why our schools look like war zones. And the response is, "Get him out. That's not politics, that's cowardice." The crowd roared, but this moment had moved past applause. Something was unraveling, and the political world could feel it. Even inside Musk's own circle, whispers of concern surfaced. Off the record, a senior strategist told Politico he picked the wrong guy to silence. Mamdani didn't attack. He asked a question, and now the country is asking it too. Not everyone agreed. On conservative radio, hosts twisted the narrative. One caller from Mississippi accused Zohran of race baiting. Another said he was performative, but even their audiences pushed back. In a call-in segment, a woman named Gina from Des Moines responded, "He was calm, he had data, he said it plainly. If that's performative, maybe we need more performances like that." In a Santa Fe coffee shop, two teachers watched the video on a tablet. One of them, Luis, a 16-year veteran, turned to his colleague and whispered, "I've said less than that in board meetings and been told to watch my tone." He didn't flinch. That matters. Zohran stayed off social media for most of the day. He was flying again, from New York to Tulsa. The visit with educators had been scheduled for weeks, but now it carried a very different weight. On the plane, he scrolled through messages. Among them, a voice memo from Senator Geller. "Assemblyman Mamdani," Geller said, his tone measured. "I know today got heated, but you asked something that should have been asked a long time ago. I hope you know, not all of us wanted you silenced." Zohran played it twice, then stared out the window. What he'd said had been simple, but the ripple? It was loud, wide, and spreading faster than anyone could contain. But Zohran hadn't yet seen the people it was really reaching. The next morning in Tulsa, the hallway outside Booker T. Washington Middle School buzzed with quiet anticipation. This wasn't a press event, it was a planned visit. He was there to meet with teachers and community leaders. But now everything had changed. Principal Keisha Robles, a tall woman with box braids and 2 decades in Oklahoma schools, met him at the door. She didn't mention the White House. She just hugged him and said, "They've been waiting for you." Inside the gymnasium-turned-auditorium, teachers shifted in their seats. Some held notepads. A few had brought their kids, still wearing backpacks. And when Zohran walked in, they clapped. Not out of protocol, but something more raw. Respect. No security, no handlers, no spotlight. Just a man with a folder, standing in front of people who understood every word he'd said the day before. "I want to start by saying," Zohran began, "I didn't go to that round table expecting to make headlines. I went there expecting to be heard." The room stayed silent. One teacher near the front nodded slowly, eyes locked on him. "And when I wasn't, I did what any one of you would have done. I spoke up anyway." There was no speechwriter, no script, just his voice and the weight of a country watching. He took questions, real ones. A teacher asked, "What do we do when our textbooks still say George Bush is president?" Another, "How do we fight for funds when the state budget's been cut 5 years in a row?" Zohran didn't give polished answers. He gave honest ones. "I don't have a silver bullet," he said, "but I know this. If we don't make noise, they'll keep pretending we're okay with scraps." It wasn't a rally, it wasn't partisan, it was personal. Afterward, a boy named Eli, maybe 13, waited beside his mother. He didn't say much, just handed Zohran a folded piece of notebook paper. Later, in the car, Zohran opened it. In pencil, it read, "I didn't think people like you got to talk to someone like him. I didn't know people like you didn't back down." He read it twice, then held it to his chest. Back in D.C., the pundits spun and debated. Headlines flooded in, but one from the Boston Ledger said it plain. Zohran Mamdani did what Congress rarely does. Tell the truth, uninvited. Zohran's clip, alongside a wish list from a local teacher, went viral. Within 24 hours, every item was fulfilled. Other educators followed. The same thing happened again and again. Something had cracked open. In private GOP circles, the question wasn't whether Musk had overreacted. It was whether he'd handed Zohran the kind of moral visibility no strategist could buy. One Musk advisor, off the record, reportedly told a journalist, "We wanted to control the narrative. Instead, we created the headline." But Zohran didn't bask in it. He didn't celebrate. He just kept showing up. A literacy workshop in Oklahoma City, a podcast with youth activists in Topeka, a community garden visit in Wichita. Everywhere he went, people stopped him, not for selfies, not for autographs, but to say, "You said what my daughter's been trying to say. You gave my son a reason not to drop out. You made me feel seen." None of it had been planned, and maybe that's what made it matter. But what came next proved this wasn't just a flash in the pan. 2 days after Tulsa, Zohran was back in Queens. His small apartment above a used bookstore in Jackson Heights felt like the only quiet place left on earth. He dropped his bag, kicked off his shoes, and sat on the floor, his back against the door. No TV, no phone, just stillness. The world had seen strength, conviction, viral moments. What it hadn't seen was the fatigue behind his eyes, the tightening in his chest every time a new notification buzzed in. He eventually stood, poured a glass of water, and stared out the window. Across the street, his neighbor's kids played soccer in the alley, laughing and shouting, like none of it mattered. And for just a moment, he envied them. His mom called just after sunset. "You need to rest," she said gently. "I saw you on the news again, right after the stock market segment." Zohran chuckled dryly. "Guess I'm more volatile than Wall Street." His mother didn't laugh. "I mean it," she said. "You're carrying a lot, and I'm proud of you. But I worry." Zohran leaned against the counter. "You and every cable host in America." "No," she replied. "They care about views. I care about the little boy who used to practice speeches into his hairbrush at 8 years old." And that got him. He smiled, softly, quietly, just for a second. Later that night, he scrolled through his inbox. Most of it was support, letters from teachers, parents, even students. But buried between them were threats. Anonymous, ugly, slurs, warnings, hate. He forwarded them to security, closed his laptop. This wasn't new, not for women, not for people of color, not for anyone who dares to speak clearly and calmly in rooms built to silence them. It never got easier. It always left a mark. The next morning, Zohran returned to his office. Brittany met him at the door, eyes wide. "You're gonna want to see this," she said, holding up a printed letter. It was handwritten, blue ink, thick paper, from a retired Army colonel in Pennsylvania. Conservative, white, Republican for life. "Assemblyman Mamdani," it began, "I didn't vote for you. I likely never will. But what you did in that room took more strength than I've seen from some of our generals. You didn't raise your voice, you raised a mirror. And whether we like it or not, that mirror is showing us something we've tried to ignore." Zohran read it 3 times, then folded it slowly and placed it in his drawer. "People are listening," Brittany said, her voice low. "I know," Zohran replied. "Now we just have to figure out what to do with that." Outside, the street was quiet, but his inbox wasn't. His voicemails weren't. His DMs overflowed. Everyone wanted something. Interviews, appearances, answers. And through it all, he kept hearing his mother's voice. "You're carrying a lot right now." He'd been called disruptive, bold, divisive, dangerous. But what stayed with him most was the voice message left late the night before by a woman in Kansas City. "I'm a bus driver, 59 years old. I've seen a lot, but I've never seen someone walk into that house, speak like you did, someone like that, and walk out with their head high. That did something to me. Please don't stop." Zohran sat at his desk, looked out the window. A group of elementary school kids walked past, backpacks too big for their bodies. One of them pointed up at the building. "That's where he works," the kid said. He was right, and for the first time, that office didn't just feel like an office, it felt like a responsibility. But with every spotlight came a shadow, and people were already working behind the scenes to dim his light. By the end of the week, this wasn't just a viral moment, it was a reckoning. Major outlets ran primetime specials on school funding inequality. On PBS, they aired Zohran's line, "If asking about equity makes you uncomfortable, maybe that's the conversation we need most." Over a montage of broken desks, peeling paint, and overworked teachers. Zohran hadn't done more interviews, not because he was hiding, but because he didn't want his face to replace the issue. The door had been cracked open. He wanted the people behind that door to be heard, but the attention wouldn't stop. On CNN's Sunday morning panel, they aired a segment titled, "Who Gets to Ask the Hard Questions?" Guests included educators, parents, even students from rural districts across the Midwest. The conversation wasn't just about Zohran anymore. It was about every ignored classroom, every underfunded school, every time a black or brown or immigrant voice in Congress is called aggressive for saying what others are praised for. The country wasn't just reacting anymore, it was reflecting. One clip went viral. A retired corrections officer in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, white, mid-60s, Vietnam vet cap, sat on his porch with a dog curled at his feet. His granddaughter filmed him as he spoke directly into the camera. "I don't agree with most Democrats," he said, "but that man, he didn't yell. He didn't wave a sign. He just told the truth. And if the truth makes the president that uncomfortable, maybe he ain't doing his job. The clip hit 10 million views in under 24 hours. Zohran's team never reached out. The man didn't want attention. But his words were repeated by anchors, quoted in op-eds, even printed on signs at rallies. Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, some Democrats began to speak louder. At a press conference, the House Minority Leader said, "Zohran Mamdani reminded us what public service is supposed to look like." And the country, for once, wasn't just listening, it was learning. Behind closed doors, the reaction wasn't all praise. Political operatives close to Elon Musk met for a private strategy session at a golf club in Mar-a-Lago. A memo circulated across the table. At the center, one bullet point in bold, portray Representative Zohran Mamdani as divisive, uncooperative, and radical. Emphasize lack of solutions. They didn't want to admit that he had struck a nerve. They wanted control back. But the problem was people were listening to him now, and they weren't asking for permission to care. At the same time, a group of teachers in East St. Louis launched a grassroots campaign. #ClassroomsNotPolitics. Their first move? Flooding congressional voicemails with 60-second testimonies. Raw, personal, relentless. "We have one working bathroom for over 200 kids. Math teacher, rural Oklahoma. I'm here at 10:45 p.m. prepping tomorrow's lessons because I don't have enough staff to open in the morning. Principal, Fresno. That man wasn't disruptive, he was accurate. School counselor, Milwaukee. Zohran stayed focused. He met with education advocates, helped launch a working group in Congress to propose funding equity legislation. He didn't follow headlines. He led with what he knew was real. One afternoon, he returned to a school in Queens, a school that had appeared in one of his earliest campaign ads. Ceiling tiles still sagged, playground fence still bent. But this time, parents were outside, not to complain, but to thank him. A man stepped forward, paint-stained boots, calloused hands, introduced himself as Charles. "I got 2 daughters here," he said. "I don't care about politics. But when they saw you on TV standing in that room, they asked me if girls like them could do that too." Zohran smiled. "What did you tell them?" Charles looked down, then back up. "Told them they could, especially now." But the more traction Zohran gained, the more powerful people began lining up to push back. The backlash didn't come like a storm. It came like a slow leak. Whispers from within his own party, concerns about too much visibility. Some uneasy with how he'd broken through in ways most politicians never do. An op-ed appeared in a centrist policy journal. It questioned whether Zohran had jeopardized future bipartisan dialogue by framing the roundtable around identity politics. It didn't name him directly, not until the 3rd paragraph, but the implication was clear. He read it once, then closed the tab. He'd seen this script before. Polite backlash, coded language. Don't speak too sharply. Don't ruffle feathers. Don't be divisive. But the public wasn't reading it that way. Across the country, grassroots organizers printed his words on t-shirts, on school signs, on cardboard posters at PTA meetings. In Sacramento, students at a public high school staged a walkout. They demanded cleaner classrooms, updated textbooks, mental health counselors. Their chant, "If it makes you uncomfortable, good." One sign showed a pencil sketch of Zohran mid-sentence, eyes sharp, jaw steady. His office received a call from Lincoln Elementary in Tulsa, the same school he had visited just a week earlier. "We'd like to invite Representative Mamdani back," the principal said. "The kids, they talk about him like he's a superhero." And so he went. No press, no speeches, just Zohran, a few staffers, and a school full of kids who couldn't believe someone from TV was walking down their hallway. Outside the library, a 3rd-grade girl named Tamika raised her hand. "Are you scared," she asked, "when you talk in front of powerful people?" Zohran knelt down and smiled. "Every single time," he said, "but I do it anyway." That answer spread faster than any tweet. Teachers turned it into a classroom poster, parents wrote it on fridge notes, and kids remembered it. Because by now, Zohran's story had shifted. It wasn't about Musk. It wasn't about that one room. It had become a mirror, a question. Who gets to speak? Who gets to challenge? Who gets to be heard without being removed? Back in Queens, Zohran sat with a group of high school seniors working on college essays. One boy, Andre, had watched the clip so many times he could quote it by heart. "I want to be like that," he said. "Not just mad, just right and not afraid." That night, Zohran returned to his apartment, lights low, a boss on his table marked "Keep." Inside, handwritten letters. He flipped through them slowly. One was from a woman in Vermont who ran a home daycare. "I cried when you said it," the letter read. "I've cried so many times over these kids, knowing the system doesn't care. I don't have political words. Just thank you." Zohran folded the letter, held it for a moment, then placed it gently in the box. Meanwhile, the same strategist who wrote the memo against him was now on a podcast. He's a flash, not a movement, a moment. But Zohran knew, moments can turn into something else if they don't go away. At a town hall in St. Louis, he took the stage. No teleprompter, no script. "There's a reason people are reacting like this," he said, pacing slowly in front of the packed room. "It's not about me, it's about the silence they've had to sit through for years. Silence in classrooms, silence in council meetings, silence when budgets get slashed, and no one explains why." He paused. "I was told I disrupted that room. But if asking why kids go to school with broken windows is disruptive, maybe disruption is overdue." The applause wasn't polite, it came from the gut. In the back row, a grandmother in a blue sweater wiped her eyes and whispered to her daughter, "He's saying what we've been yelling for years, just louder." But as Zohran's message spread, so did the pressure. From party leaders, from donors, from those afraid his voice was reshaping the conversation in ways they couldn't control. 2 weeks after the White House roundtable, Zohran Mamdani stood in a packed auditorium at Normandy High School in North St. Louis. The lighting was dim, the sound system crackled. Chairs squeaked every time someone shifted, but none of it mattered. The place was full. Parents, students, teachers, people from nearby counties who came just to listen. No banner, no slogan, just Zohran, in a blazer and jeans, holding a stack of notes he barely looked at. He didn't need a script. He had lived this. "My first classroom," he began, "had missing ceiling tiles, and a blackboard so scratched, we wrote on notebook paper instead. My science teacher brought in light bulbs from home, just so we could run one experiment." A few heads nodded, a few murmured softly, the kind of sound people make when they've seen the same thing. "I didn't grow up thinking I'd one day walk into the White House," Zohran said, "but I also didn't think I'd still be talking about broken bathrooms and kids without pencils 25 years later." He paused, let the silence breathe. "That day at the round table, I asked a question, a simple one, and some folks thought it was too direct, too uncomfortable. But here's the truth. Asking why your school has no heat shouldn't make people nervous. It should make them fix it." That line earned the first full round of applause. Not polite, not performative, but the kind that lands hard. Zohran took a sip of water. He looked at the faces in the front row, young and old, tired and hopeful. "What I've learned since then is this. People will try to shrink you, especially when you speak without permission, especially when you speak about things they'd rather ignore." He stepped away from the mic, closer to the edge of the stage, closer to them. "I didn't go viral because I said something clever. I went viral because people are tired. Tired of watching their kids get the leftovers. Tired of walking into schools that look like abandoned buildings. Tired of waiting for someone in a suit to care." From the side of the room, a teacher clapped first, then others followed. Even the students, some leaning on the backs of chairs, started nodding along. Zohran smiled, just slightly. "I don't want to be a symbol," he said. "I want to be useful." Then with a steady voice and eyes locked on the crowd, "If you're a student, ask the questions. Even the ones they don't want you to ask, especially those. If you're a parent, show up, not just when it's easy, when it's hard. And if you're a teacher, keep speaking, keep documenting, keep pushing, even if no one's listening right now." He closed his notes, didn't need them anymore, looked out across the room one last time. I got removed from a meeting, but I wasn't silenced. I was amplified because what they forgot is this: truth echoes. And once it's out, you can't stuff it back in. The room rose. No music, no confetti, no cameras flashing. Just people on their feet, clapping, yelling, whistling, because somehow they had just witnessed something honest in a world built on deflection. Outside the auditorium that night, an older man stopped him on the way to the car. He wore a maintenance uniform. His name tag read, Ronnie. "I saw it," he said. Zohran stopped. "I saw what you said. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't act crazy. You just asked the question no one else wanted to answer. I respect that." "Thank you," Zohran said quietly. Ronnie nodded. "My granddaughter wants to be a teacher. I want her to know she matters before she ever walks in that classroom." Zohran looked him in the eye. "She does, and don't let anybody tell her different," Ronnie smiled. "I won't." As Zohran got into the car, he didn't check his phone, didn't look at the mentions, didn't scroll through headlines. He just sat there, still, letting the night settle. He had spoken his truth, not for the clicks, not for the camera, but for the kids who don't have the luxury of waiting another decade for someone to care. And if that made people uncomfortable, so be it. If this story moved you, share it, talk about it, keep the conversation alive. And if you haven't already, subscribe for more stories that challenge silence and lift the voices that matter most.